Police had to put themselves between the demonstrators in front of federal parliament as passions ran high. Not least with Dolma Sangmo, who had travelled to Canberra with members of Sydney's Tibetan community. She broke from the crowd but didn't get far.
I didn't do any violence. I did do with non-violence. So I tell police, please, you all understand about my country. Stop, I said, stop the torching in Tibet and stop killing Tibet people in Tibet.
Her husband and daughter were left in the line of protesters.
She's so very emotional and last night could sleep because this is we are good one opportunity. Because this is emotion for her, you know what I mean? And she was in prison, in jail, and 3-4 times because that's why she just
for years and years.
So fantastic that the Torch Relay is giving expression to people who are totally suppressed.
Stop killing Tibet!
It was just one of many incidents to mar the passage of the flame on its Australian leg, as it continues to attract anti-Chinese protests on its way to Beijing. Still, the Australian organisers who had feared the worst were claiming success. After all, they'd been able to protect the relay runners, who had become targets for attack elsewhere, and the route had been kept intact.
It was obvious from reviewing the way in which the relay was sought to be conducted in London and in Paris and in San Francisco, in other places, some very fundamental mistakes were made. They were learnt from, they were observed, and they weren't repeated here.
By early morning, thousands of Chinese had descended on Canberra. They mainly came in convoys of buses from Sydney and Melbourne to show the flag for their homeland, which they claim has been vilified through the treatment of the Torch Relay in the West. Xu Lan was one of many university students determined to raise her voice for Beijing.
We are here because we are angry at the just unfortunate experience that the Torch has had in other places in the world. That's what brought us here.
It's an issue that has even touched those who have made Australia their home for decades.
Because they are proud of where they come from. They are Australian citizens, but they're proud of their ancestry. So when the old country gets the Guernsey, why not come and wave the flag a little bit?
There's so many of you here. It's my right.
The Chinese vastly outnumbered those who had come to Canberra to protest against Beijing. Even before the relay began, public warnings were issued that the Torch Relay would be cancelled unless the Chinese flag wavers kept their designated distance from the pro-Tibetan demonstrators and others. On the relay route, China's controversial flame attendants kept their distance for the most part, occasionally shepherded away by Australian police.
It's quite obvious today that there is one police force in the world that understands how to run a major event, and it's the ACT police force.
Tibetan protesters claim they were subjected to physical and verbal abuse by some Chinese protesters.
This morning, Chinese beat our people some way, and then they beat on the nose, and then the punch, and then take our flag and put under their feet, and then they punch the Tibetan people.
But Tibetan protest organisers believe they made their point.
It was a perfect opportunity for us to show them practical way how people behave in a freedom, in a democracy country.
Greens Senator Bob Brown was the only federal politician to side with the pro-Tibetan demonstrators outside Parliament, delivering a message to the opposing Chinese protesters.
And I have to remind them, if they were Tibetans going to Beijing to similarly protest peacefully, they'd all end up in jail.
If you've got a problem with human rights, go to the United Nations and talk about it.
The demonstration of support for the Torch Relay in Canberra is just a small indication of the nationalistic fervour now sweeping China.
Well, my friends, my family, and all my teachers in China, they all get angry and they all help that way. We're international students overseas. So they hope that we can do something for the peaceful relay, for the torch.
The Chinese bosses had better watch out. They overran the Democrats, students, with their tanks in Tiananmen Square 18 or so years ago. But next time, when the flame of democracy gets going in China, they're not going to be able to contain it.
After her arrest, Dolma Sangmo was released without charge.
In Australia, everything is freedom. Everything is enough. Everything is fantastic. But my heart's in Tibet. My heart's left in Tibet.
Dolma, being an ex-political prisoner, she wants to send a clear message that that Tibetans who were arrested last month, and the numbers are in 4,000, and because she was ex-political prisoner, I thought, you know, she was quite emotional.
Having safely negotiated the protesters, the torchbearers and the relay organisers felt they had good reason to celebrate, despite a hiccup with Ian Thorpe at the very end.
And I've spoken to members of the AOC and the IOC today, and they are stoked that, in fact, something that looked like going down the tubes may have been turned around by the job that was done by so many this day.
But more trouble awaits the torch in Japan before it finally finds sanctuary in China.